know we got a packed house, no, just kidding. Great to have all of you here. I'm Brandon, so, just as sort of a bit of an introduction, I'm a student here as well. I'm a sixth-year PhD candidate at the Med Center in biochemistry and molecular biology. And I'm also a co-founder of a startup that's like very much orthogonal to my research. So it's a difficult balance, but we're entrepreneurs, so we're gluttons for punishment, but it's for the greater good. So that's what we're doing. So thank you for coming. What's your name?
My name is Jesse.
Jesse, nice to meet you. What's your name?
My name is Nick.
Nick, nice to meet you. And we have Teddy in the back. So I'm gonna start off with kind of, some background and trying to, maybe probe a little bit with questions, set the stage for, why pitching is an important skill. And I really want everyone here to understand that, not only is a pitch valuable in business, but like these skills are incredibly transferable in all aspects of, professional development and, job hunting and all that sort of stuff in academia and outside. So first things first, why is pitching an important skill? So what is a pitch? Anyone can answer, shout out. I would like some answers.
It's a short spiel about what your product and business is about and what problem you're trying to solve.
Very good. Yeah. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, proposal, a short proposal, kind of right to the point, how you're gonna make a difference.
Okay. Teddy, anything to add or?
So I don't normally participate in that.
Okay. Sounds good.
I'm just here to observe.
So a pitch in general is just a presentation of idea to a group of people you are trying to convince to support in your idea. But exactly, like a business pitch, why might someone want to develop a pitch in terms of a business? It's a presentation, short to the point, to a group of people who can help turn your business into a reality. And so, and going back to the first part, just in general, a presentation of idea to get you to support something is really, important in everything. So if you're, gonna create a group of any kind and you want to get a following, you want to sort of convince people that, your mission or the things that you're trying to accomplish are important and they can believe in you and you want to follow them to do that kind of stuff, right? So it's really just gaining support and traction in like what you're trying to do. So the next part is, who might you be pitching to? So I know that we're focusing on business more or less in being here, but like in general, think about it. Who might you be pitching to? Let's just shout out some, some names, some things.
Your customers,
Customers,
Investors,
investors,
a bank for a loan,
sure.
Employer.
potential business partners,
Yeah. All of these things. So you hit on customers, team members, employees, strategic partners, investors. Another thing, advisory board members. So if you're trying to, again, get people to join your team, like especially as entrepreneurs, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but typically, one person doesn't have all the skills to do everything. There are solo entrepreneurs, but that's why, having an advisory board, other people that can essentially give you mentorship, other pieces of advice, consulting sort of opportunities is important in giving your business and your venture sort of the full picture and the ability to tackle a problem from all angles. So I think big picture too, understanding your limitations is really important. So yeah. And so pitching to investors. So Jesse, Nick, do either of you have businesses or are you interested in developing a business?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of developing a startup right now. And we're in an accelerator. It's in the early stages, so it's ideation stage right now.
Very cool.
It's called Wikia, and that means reach or achievement. So we're trying to create a platform for students from my country, Kenya, to find internship opportunities, much like Handshake does for colleges here.
Very cool. What accelerator are you in?
It's called BizWorld. I don't think it's a popular one, but it's a pretty nice and supportive one for now.
Cool. Very cool. How about you, Nick?
no, nothing too serious besides just internships, like pitching my resume and myself to potential employers.
Okay. So you're looking to maybe join a startup or some sort of company like that?
Probably not. Why not join a startup? That would be a nice thing for me to start on my own if I really felt like, or kind of like co-sponsor that, but I think it'd be good to kind of get like go straight to the belly of the beast and see like, do I like kind of the bigger businesses? And if I do like that, and I feel like I can still make an impact, just try to go there, but obviously I still value like the startups and those businesses that can then become, the bigger businesses.
Right? Hey, that's that's a good strategy as well. So if we're pitching to investors, either way, you're going to be answering to investors, whether, it's for your startup or, you're going to the belly of the beast for a bigger investor, you have people to answer to. And, there's always going to be opportunities to get funding for different things, whether it's internally at bigger places or externally. So a few things to keep in mind when you're going to these folks. Their investors are very, very busy and they listen to thousands of pitches a year, like extremely, extremely difficult to do and also to understand because a lot of them are from multiple different industries and interdisciplinary in that way. So it's advantageous to develop a quick and effective presentation to, save them. So exactly like you guys said at the beginning. Many investors have a specific format that you want to follow. And so this is not going to be a secret if you're going to a particular group. They'll tell you either like kind of the main categories of what they want in a certain order, or they'll have like a template on their website. Like for example, Excel Partners, which are very heavily involved in the business school here at University of Rochester. They have on their website sort of a template to follow when they do it. And I've spoken to Rami, who's the chief operating officer, because we're trying to pitch to them eventually. And he literally told me, we're very, very busy. I listen to 1,000 pitches a year. Like, make sure that you have these elements, or like it's not going to be a very, easy, quick presentation to follow. And if you don't do that kind of stuff, they might just kick you out the door because, they have, again, thousands of opportunities. And really what they're doing is you're convincing them that you're the expert on your business and you're convincing them why they should invest in you over another person. In other words, you're convincing them that you are a less risky bet for them to put their money into. And you're a more surefire way to get a return on investment or ROI. And that's at the end of the day, what they want you to do. Like, you want to grow your company, you want to make money, you want to touch and impact your customers in a positive way. And they want to see you do that at the same thing. And then also grow, their portfolio so they can invest in more companies, right? It's kind of, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of way. And so sort of for the rest of the time here, we're going to go through kind of the general format of, some, or sort of I wouldn't say it's like one format fits all kind of thing, but at least what we're going to talk about today are like the main elements that should go into an investor pitch. Especially, this is kind of modeled after what a lot of the Rochester Angels expect, and kind of local investors. But again, it could be different, but just understand the elements that are going to go into it are just about the same. So the main takeaways that I want you to have from this workshop are like, what are the most important parts of each segment of your pitch? What are the main takeaways that you want your investors to take away and the messages that you want them to understand, right? Like, and the ways to be clear about it. So, first slide, your company example pitch deck format doesn't have to be too complicated. I'm going to use my company as a case study. So my company is RHM Innovations. We develop assistive bathing technologies for more frail and disabled individuals. And so you'll see kind of an example, like I'll provide examples of like what we have in each category, the problem, the market, and all that kind of stuff. So this is our first slide. Very simple, very clean. We have a tagline here, our logo, our name, and then just kind of a picture to show like, okay, this is kind of the experience that we're going to give. It's supposed to be more of a compassionate sort of company, not like a super hot, sexy tech kind of thing, So understanding what the message you're trying to get right from the beginning is important. And so you want to start by talking about your company profile. So briefly describe your company, what it does, and then who are the key members of your team and what roles do they play? So like, who's really going to be carrying out most of the work on a day-to-day basis? And so in our case, we just say our products increase safety while bathing. Courtney, who is my co-founder and CEO, she and her experience is in operations. And she's also started another venture. So we kind of talk about the experience that she's had and giving her some credibility in what she does. And then me, Brandon J. Burris, I'm CFO and co-founder. I have years of experience in sales and operations. I've sold in multiple different industries, including vacuum cleaners, driveway seal coating jobs, medical devices, so Why am I the best person to lead our fledgling sales department? Well, that is why. And then sort of as an overarching theme, you want to minimize the text on your slides. Images and diagrams are very good. You know, typical academic slides are not very conducive to investor pitches. They typically overwhelm people who are looking at them and are easily confusable. So something like this, where text is helpful because you want to highlight the main points of what you're trying to say, but not too many. So like that's just kind of a main theme overall. So then the first thing you really should start with is the problem. Why do I care? Why is your business tackling something that, you know, people are passionate about, what they should be passionate about? And if it's something that we all experience, you know, explain, you know, how you can relate to it, because that's really going to be the most powerful thing. So describe the problem that your company solves. Remember, a successful company either solves a problem, fills a need, does a job, provides a desirable experience for one or more customer segments. What does your company do for their customers? So Jesse, what does your company do for your customers? And what problem are you solving?
Okay, so our customers are primarily students who are in universities, public universities across different countries in Africa. And the problem we're solving is access to professional opportunities. So oftentimes students who go to public universities don't have access to internships and industry experience that leaves a gap where when you're going into the industry expects you to have 2 to 3 years of experience, but you don't have that experience. And so that's the problem we're trying to solve by providing these partnerships between companies and universities so that students can transition into the workforce starting from when they're in university.
Nice, very nice. And also very, you know, good job explaining it. The only thing that I'll say too is when you're thinking about, and that was really good. The only thing I'll say is
Off the
off the cuff, right? No, that was great. And I think that's obviously like a really good, you know, like what in terms of, you know, sort of the workshop here. Try to think about these things, and you're probably already thinking about these, but when you're developing a pitch, I like to break it down into 3 main segments. So go back to like your junior year of high school English, where you learned, or whatever, you know, persuasive writing, where you learned what ethos, logos, and pathos are. And so basically those are the 3 main elements when you're developing a persuasive argument or some sort of a thing that, like, you know, you're trying to get to convince somebody to care about what you're talking about. And so you had all the elements there. But what I'm trying to challenge both of you guys to do is make it obvious and make it like really like, you know, brief, use your stage voices and all those types of things to really show why we should care. So the ethos is basically your credibility. So appeals to the speaker's status or authority, making the audience more likely to trust them. Essentially, you're explaining your credibility. This is the most powerful when you yourself have to experience the problem, so you have a good understanding of it, right? So when you're talking about it, maybe you talk about your personal experiences, your family, your friends, those types of things, right? I didn't give you an opportunity to say that, right? Like, I'm sure that you already know this, but these types of things here, right? Your logos is appeals to the audience's reason, building up a logical argument, right? That's where you bring about your statistics. You talk about, you know, like relatable experiences that the audience can, you know, again, relate to. And then you have your pathos. This is really kind of one of the things that like is the hook, line, and sinker for getting investors or your audience to really care about it, whether that's a competition, X, Y, and Z. It's the emotional tie to your problem. So try and make the audience feel passion for your problem. This is most powerful if you can find something that you can relate to regarding your problem or your industry. If they haven't experienced themselves, how can you stimulate the sensations or the problem with them? I feel like that would be probably one of the biggest problems you would face, is because, you know, most of us don't know that that is a big problem, right? And so figuring out how to like get that emotional tie, like say you could be, you know, an example could be like, imagine you were, you know, growing up in Kenya with limited resources, right? You're a talented student, but you just don't have the help, right? How would you feel, right? Those types of things.
Right.
And so as an example, this is what we talk about. So in May of 2020, Courtney, her dad passed away after a battle with cancer. And then a few months later, my grandparents passed away after their battles with diseases and old age. We were caregivers. You know, we were the ones who showered them. We were the ones who helped take care of them, you know, and that was an incredibly difficult experience to see them in such vulnerable and uncomfortable situations, right? This is, you know, a bit more of a common problem because most people do have grandparents that they know and they have seen in their decline and something that they can relate to. And then so this serves as not only the pathos, because it's like, you know, think about back to a time when your grandparents, your parents, God forbid, you know, passed away and you had to be a caregiver for them. Imagine how difficult that was for you. When you were in the bathroom, how difficult was that to bathe another human being, see them in such a vulnerable and uncomfortable situation, but also move and have to, you know, move a human being. You know, it's not like we're a box, right? It's a very difficult, strenuous, physically taxing experience. And then that's also the credibility. We were the caregivers. So we experienced the problem firsthand. We looked online to see, were there any products that could help with these particular problems? And the ones that we didn't have access to, the ones that there weren't products to purchase, we're like, we're gonna invent them ourselves. And so here's the logical part. Why should you care? This is not only how many people are affected by the problem, but then there's also the financial implications. Why this is a really expensive thing that you should invest in preventative type hardware solutions. So we're probably all aware with COVID, there's a significant staffing shortage, right? And if you don't have staff to take care of people, do you think you're going to receive adequate and sustainable care? No, right? So over the course of, I think it was the last few years, 15% of the entire healthcare workforce is gone. They just quit. And that has left the remaining caregivers, at least in elder and continuing care facilities, to care for 20 or more residents at any given time during their shift. What if there's more than one that has an issue that day, which is typical, right? And 99% of them has to do overtime. That's like all of them, you know? And then not only that, consider the difficulty in that industry. They 70% of the injuries are due to overexertion because you're literally lifting people. A lot of them, when they get older, they gain a lot of weight and they lose muscle mass. So they just become just very difficult to move because they can't do it themselves. So now you're lifting people every single day. 32.5% of those injuries are because of overexertion and back pain. And then the other, 38%, to round up to 70, is slips and falls because you're already exhausted. And when you're in the bathroom, it becomes a very slippery and treacherous environment. So you slip, you fall, you get hurt. And then an already slim workforce, you know, is slimmer, right? So this is why you should care about it. And so, but that's just from our research. Now, you can talk about the problem, right? You can talk about your experiences, but now it comes down to what have you done and what have you learned when you're going into the industry? So customer discovery is an incredibly important part of businesses and a big part of why businesses fail because they don't continue to do customer discovery and evolve with their market. Big example, Kodak. Why did we not invest in and develop a digital camera? Because they didn't need to, right? Of course they didn't need to. Anyway, we know and being in Rochester, we know those ramifications. So customer discovery, talk about a brief description of the number of interviews you've done and the people you've talked to, list the key hypotheses or that you've tested with those conversations, learning objectives that you learned, and then literal quotes to show like from, you know, the people that are actively experiencing the problem, what they've said other than you. And it shows that you've done your due diligence in your market research. So for example, this is our slide, very simple, right to the point. We've done over 400 customer discovery interviews. We've talked to nurses, aides, loved ones, executives of elder care facilities. We talked to executives of insurance companies. We've talked to people in charge of Medicare, Medicaid, government regulations. You know, more often, and you know, we've also talked to other caregivers, whether they're just a loved one or someone who's employed by an institution. And whether it's executives at these places or people on the ground, they're having issues, right? And so this is where you kind of just briefly describe, we talk to all these different people and everyone says the same thing, or they say these same things. And then, you know, you're done with customer discovery, at least for now, when the more people you talk to say the exact same things. That's when you know that you've done enough work on the ground to understand the needs of your marketplace. Any questions also? Feel free to interrupt me with any questions. Okay, that's totally cool. And so now at this point, you've convinced them that you've researched and you've discovered the gravity of the problem, right? So the solution, what is also the drawbacks of the current solutions? Well, in our case, there is a critical need for more effective hardware equipment that serves as preventative care and taking strain off of the aides and the healthcare staff. So The solution would be a brief description of the product or service that you are proposing. So Jesse, like what you're proposing, you're proposing a platform that's going to provide, employment and mentoring needs to students that otherwise wouldn't have them. Brilliant. And so what would be helpful is a picture or a graphic of the product, a diagram if you don't necessarily have an MVP or a functional prototype yet that illustrates what it's actually going to do. Because this is one of the hardest parts of innovation. You're convincing someone of something that hasn't been invented yet, why they should fund you, right? It's easy to relate it to somebody. It's easy for them to understand when you've related it to something that's also already existing, right? Like you said, something like handshake. I totally get it. I know what handshake is. Because you said that, I understand it. So that was really a good example. And so this is an example of what we have. This is our functional prototype. This is actually the aiding arm 2.0. So it's a clip-on shower chair attachment that provides an adapter for the removable shower head that allows the user to easily move it front to back and then in a 180-degree semicircle using this rotational component here. It's height adjustable and it has a weight-bearing arm to aid in transferring in and out of the tub where most of the injuries occur. And so, furthering describing your product, it's important to say, what is the functionality it provides? Its design and physical configurations and the key value that it adds. So like, why is, the different components of your design better, right, than what is currently in the standard of the market? And then what's the status of your product? Is it just in the idea stage, right? Like you said, it's a conceptual design. Are you demonstrating? Is it a prototype or are you actively selling in the marketplace? And either way is totally fine. It's better to be completely honest and straightforward in where you're at and where you're going. And so this was a video. This is Courtney actually testing it. And I wish I could show you, but she's literally just holding on to the cord here and she's easily moving it side to side and front to back. And she lets it go and it stays in the same place. So if you've ever bathed someone or seen someone bathe, there's a lot of products that have been innovated in the space to get into the tub. But once you're in the tub, it's typically a miserable experience. You're washing someone and then, you have to like rinse them off. Then you put it down. Then the person gets cold. And then what if you drop it? The water's spraying everywhere and that's how people get hurt. And so, you can put a lot of these things in different places in your pitch, but like one of the elements that we put directly after this is that not only have we developed it, but we're testing it with real people in real places that have, real money to buy these things. So we have facility relationships in some of the leading elder care facilities in the entire state, and then also group home facilities targeting disabled and elderly individuals because they broadly have the same problems when bathing. And really, like the staff is what we're trying to target to take the strain off of them. They're doing the same types of things. And so now we get down to it. Who's our customer, right? So describe your customer, the persons or organizations that has the problem that you described in the solution slide. And you want to describe them in as detailed as a way as possible. So here's an example, right? You have initial flat screen TV customers, your target, men aged 29 to 45, incomes greater than 100,000 a year, they're sports fans. You can look up online and find how many of these people are purchasing because many databases have already recorded, and have tracked marketplaces. A market is really just is an environment, an industry where dollars are changing hands. So think about your classes of products, think about, who fits into that demographic. And so, you like Jesse, you did a good job with your students, right? Maybe you could be a bit more specific about the age of the students or where they are in their study. Are they leaving? Are they trying to do different things? Maybe you break up your platform into a couple of different segments to help, students at their different ages or stages of education and development, right? And so with our initial customers are purchasing directors at continuing care facilities. So our go-to-market strategy focuses on these elder care facilities and continuing care facilities so we can maximize on larger purchase orders. Because at least in the facilities that I told you about, there's 500 individual shower rooms. Our device could literally go in every single one. And our year one goal is 500 units sold, and I'll show you in a little later, and that could get us $750,000 in revenue, right? That's why, like, when you quantify these things, it tells investors, okay, you do X thing and you target X person, you could get X outcome, right? In their head, they're trying to do this simple math, and our job is to make it easy for them. And so, but as you know, these institutions, they typically are difficult and convoluted to understand, right? I keep picking on you, Jesse, but you did a good job with your talking about your platform. You're trying to get into, actually, let me ask you, what is your ideal customer? Is it an institution or is it like a group of people somehow?
So our ideal customer, so the paying customer, obviously the solution that we're trying to create is to help students, number one. But if it's coming about revenue, I think our customers are the universities that will be, hosting these students, because they're the ones who are going to be paying for the platform. And the companies that we're going to partner with, because we're trying to also reduce their recruitment costs, right? So make it easier for them to recruit from the ground. So those are the two main customers.
Right. So do you know who is the person that would ultimately make the decision to say, hey, we're going to onboard, what is it? You said FICA?
FICA.
FICA.
Yeah.
We're going to say FICA is, we're going to pay for the service.
University Career Center. So
Okay.
is that a better, or is it a specific person you're thinking about?
You got to tell me,
Um,
I don't know anything about your industry, really.
Yeah, so the person who's gonna pay is going to be, we're going to go to the University Career Center, and whoever heads that department, we're going to go to them and we're say, hey, we have this product, we're trying to get to your students. We have this much interviews that we've done with students and they have this problem, so they really need to shout out.
Right.
And then on the other side, for recruiters, I think would be our main target on the company side, because we were going to tell them, hey, you guys have recruitment costs that you're currently raking up, and we're trying to break that down for you and make it easier for you to get talent and onboard them in a way that's cheaper and more sustainable over time. So those are the people we target in those two different stakeholder segments.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Exactly. And really, like, the big example from what you said is you were able to tell me where in a university you're going to go, right? You didn't just broadly say universities are going to be our customers. Well, like, that doesn't tell me anything, right? So that was exactly what you said is exactly what you got to do. And so here's a slide that basically says, we're going to these facilities. You don't understand anything about facilities. Let me tell you where I'm going in these facilities to tell people, hey, you got to buy this thing from me. And so we're using Mosaic, which is formerly the Arc of Monroe. They're the group home facilities that service developmentally and physically disabled individuals. And so here's kind of the hierarchy of the executives. So Alan Connolly is the president and CEO. He's what we call the money man. He makes the decisions, right? But he doesn't make these decisions without input from Heather O'Connell, who's the director of services. She's the one who goes in between the staff and Alan and says, these are our current needs. These are the problems. This is what's happening. This is how much it's costing us. This is what I recommend you do, right? And then he goes and crunches the numbers and says, okay, here's our budget. We can do this and X, Y, and Z, right? And so, but she doesn't make those recommendations without, feedback from her care staff that she manages at her 23 facilities. So she's going to go to all those facilities and say, do we all have this problem? If she says yes, okay. Like, would you like me to do X, Y, and Z? That would be great. And then she'll go to Alan and she'll say, I recommend that you do that. You look into these products, and then we can have a conversation with, the companies, and we can say, how much would it be if we were to order X, Y, and Z, right? Because if you're ordering in bulk, typically you can negotiate a fair price on both sides. So that way it's like, although Alan is the person making the decisions, Heather's perspective and input is the most critical for us in getting a sale. Does that make sense? Okay. And now we get to probably the most, excuse me. Now we get to probably the most interesting slides if you're pitching to investors. What is the market potential? How much money can we make? And how far do we need to go? So how many of these customers exist? Where are they? Are the numbers growing, declining? Representing this using TAM Samsung. Do we know what TAM Samsung is?
I've heard it a bunch of times and I forget SAM, but I think TAM is total available market. SAM, I'm not sure, but S is share of market share kind of.
Yep.
Yeah,
You're close, you're getting there.
Yeah.
Nick?
SAM is developed market. And is I forget the song.
Yeah, good job, guys. So yeah, the TAM is the total addressable market. So that's like, if you're thinking, broad class, like dollars changing hands, category of products. That's like the entire thing. How many dollars are actually changing hands? The serviceable available market is the segment of your market, basically, that you're going to penetrate, right? So if we think about the, electronics market, right? Super broad, but that is an entire market. What segment of the market? Are you looking at televisions? Are you looking at, different applications, that kind of thing? And then the SOM is a serviceable obtainable market. That is the number that you come up with. That is the number, the percentage of the market that you think you can reasonably capture in 5 to 10 years. So you're going to tell these investors that we think that we can capture, X number of, or X percentage of the market. That's going to be our market share, as we grow, and here's our plan to get there, kind of thing. So this is basically where we start saying from the top down, this is how big it is, and then this is how we're going to get there. And so this is an example of ours, right? So the assistive technology device market. So if we just focus on the bathroom, right? Our total addressable market is $5 billion. That's a pretty big number, right? I would love $5 billion one day. Even $1 billion would be great. But the US bathroom safety assistive device market, $5 billion. Now let's move, but like the bathroom's a big place, right? We know that there's two major ADLs. We have toileting and showering. And so let's move over to the shower. Well, if we're just focusing on products that are for the shower, that is 60% of that. 60% of the whole market is sales of assistive shower devices. So that's our serviceable available market. That's a segment of the market that we're looking to penetrate into specifically. And then the number that we came up with for our serviceable available market is, we think that we can reasonably capture in the next 5 to 10 years, 20% of bathrooms in US assisted living facilities. Here's the math of how we got there. There was a recent government regulation in 2016 that basically said, if you're an elder care facility, assisted living, you need to renovate your facility to ensure that everyone has their own private bathroom. So that means per licensed bed, you have a bathroom. So that makes the math really, really, really easy. There are 1 million licensed beds in assisted living facility in the United States. So therefore, if we capture 20% of them, that's 200,000. We sell 200,000 products at our wholesale price of $1,000. That gets us $200 million, right? The math checks out. It's backable, easy to understand, right? That's kind of how you got to think about that when you're pitching it. Any questions on that part?
I'm just curious how you find such information. Like obviously, when it's something about okay, the bathroom, right? So when you're looking at the total addressable market for the bathroom, are you looking at products that are inside a bathroom and what that costs in the market, or what kind of I say model goes into setting up your town and so on?
Right. So there's two ways that you could really do it. The easiest way, and probably the most acceptable way, is you're trying to penetrate an already existing market. Like it's 2023, right? More than likely, you're going to be selling a product that can be lumped in with a group of products that's already being sold. And I would recommend doing it that way because that's the easiest for an investor to understand. They're already thinking in these terms of things. And if you're going to a particular investor, they're probably familiar with that industry, right? So the more that they can understand where you fit in, especially if they're only giving you 5 minutes, that's going to be critical. So I literally just Googled US bathroom assistive device market. How much? And then it spit out a couple of resources. I checked a few of them. I'm a researcher, so I don't just take one for an answer. And then I found that this was the common figure. And then I looked a little bit further. What percentage of these markets, and typically in those articles, it breaks down which products, capture certain shares of the market. I was able to delineate that 60% of those were sales of assistive bathing devices, most of which are actually just the standard shower chair. But that just kind of shows where the market is at. And again, a market is really just dollars changing hands. Where are dollars changing hands, right? So Nick, in your case, if you're looking, I've been picking on Jesse this whole time. If you're looking at, these big companies, right? You're talking about, say, Constellation Brands, right? They're the alcohol and spirit giant, right? They're getting into the alcohol and spirit market. but like what section of that? Constellation's biggest export or their biggest products that they're selling are wine, you know, and then also you have your Corona and your Svedkas. But you can basically, you know, Google and figure out what percentage of all of, you know, this, or what percentage of the market is sales of your wines, you know, your liquors and your other spirits and those types of things. And these should be publicly available knowledge because companies need to be reporting these things.
Okay, and then I guess the other question is there too much of a like exaggerated figure? Like, you know, if we're talking about maybe, let's say students who are in university right now. You know, those could be in the millions, right?
Yep.
So is it, if I was to put a figure of like 500 billion or something, like, is there a limit to, you know, how do you like define your total? Are you exaggerating? Are you just making figures up? Or, you know, like you said, there's a market for it, right? But I could say, there are students who we don't even know are enrolled into universities, right? So do I count them? Those kind of questions. Is that just up to me to decide, or I guess my question is there like a standard? Are you like making up these things now? You know, like, are you just trying to make yourself look bigger than you are?
Right. That's a good question. It's a really good question. And that is obviously the fear, you know, of investors. So if you're going to come in there and say, you know, that this is $1 trillion market, it better be $1 trillion market, right? But let me answer this with a different thing. Would you say that $5 billion is a small market? Would it be worth it to build a venture to try to capture a percentage of $5 billion?
I think it definitely is.
Right? An investor would more than likely say the same thing. Conservative numbers that are accurate are good, and they're better than saying we're all going to be trillionaires one day, right? If you can build a good business model and you can tell them that and give conservative estimates, and then once you build, you're like, oh wow, I can become a bigger company like a Facebook, a Google, that kind of thing, then that's only positive for you. So I would say err on the side of conservativeness, because if like you're getting into a market of, you know, students, right? You know, there's, I don't know the numbers, but there's, you know, tens, hundreds of millions of students worldwide, right? You're getting into a global market, really. So, you know, you could segment that to the United States and then segment that to like, not all students are going to use your platform because not all students experience the problem. You know, your total addressable market would be, you know, really broadly could just be the students, right? Your serviceable available market could be who is experiencing the problem. And then your obtainable market is, it's unrealistic to say that you're going to get 100% capture of your market, right? What percentage of your market can you capture? And if you're capturing 1 million students, 500,000 students, but your platform is like a freemium or premium model that's you're paying monthly, and then your recurring revenue is going to be, you know, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, and then you're, you know, also a tech platform. So you're going to be able to capture really big margins. I don't think you're going to have to necessarily worry about, you know, trying to have these exorbitant figures, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would say, like, if it seems like it's outrageous, then maybe do a little bit more digging, because more conservative numbers that are still respectable like this, like I'll tell you, when we first started, like we did it in terms of the number of everyone that could experience the problem. So there's 111 million people that are elderly and disabled in the United States. That's a third of our population. That's crazy, you know? But of those numbers, not all of them are actively receiving care, right? So we break that down to 65 million people who are receiving care for their disabilities or whatever. You take out, you know, a lot of people who kind of refuse the care, that breaks down that number to 10 million for aging related care. You have 8 million for people who are receiving disabled care. The number is roughly 20 million. And then 20 million people, if each of those buy an aging arm, that's what, $20 billion? I mean, that's huge. You know, it doesn't need to be that big, basically. So the market could, like, you could basically calculate those numbers and say, if we capture a larger percentage of the market, we could get to this point, but realistically, this is what we're getting to. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Yeah, that's a good question. Long story short, err on the side of conservative numbers and look like if you do market analyses, like there's a ton of these websites and web platforms that are like, hey, look at our data, look at our data, look at our data, right? Because then they'll try to get you to buy their data. You don't need to buy the data, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense? Err on the side of being conservative, and then having sources to back it up would be good. Yeah. And so then we get to your value proposition. So the value proposition is where you describe the value, your set of desirable outcomes that you are causing the customer to have. So it should fit this format. And that can be the only slide in your deck that is all text, because you literally want them to read it. You will read it to your investors. They need to understand it, right? So for your target customers, your product provides blah, 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 the desirable outcomes at a price for reference. So, you know, if you're trying to be a disruptor in a particular space, the definition of being a disruptor is providing a good enough service for a fraction of the cost. You know, and that's a good way to say it. And so here's our example of our value proposition. So for continuing care facility administrators who lack sufficient staff to regularly bathe their residents, the aiding room is an assisted bathing device that increases safety and efficiency of the bathing process. Unlike other companies that just focus on the transfer process, it decreases strain on healthcare staff, leading to more showers and a healthier experience for their residents. And we clearly bolded and changed the color of, you know, the words that we really want them to say. And going back to the initial part for investors, like a lot of them have attention span shorter than goldfish. Like you really need to be very blatant and obvious, and it's not their fault, right? Sometimes it's their fault, but other times it's not their fault. Does that make sense? Okay. And so your competitive situation, this is where you're like, okay, now I've convinced you that this is a problem. Now I've convinced you that there is a really significant market for this. There is a need for this. What is everyone else doing and how am I different? Why do you need to care about me and why am I better than the competition? And so here's our competitive differentiation. So basically, you know, you want to have a very simple and straight to the point chart that has the main value that not only you, but also your customers or your competitors are trying to add with their products to the field. Okay. So we're RHM Innovations. Our main competitions are new products in the caregram field. There's other ones, but basically pick your main ones. And so the way that we talk about this slide is we have these competitors. Not all of them are innovating in the space. You have these bigger durable medical equipment companies like Graham Fields and Invacare that are old. They have a pretty significant command on the market with the existing shower chairs and smaller products, and they're doing fine. They don't really care to innovate in the field. But then you got other products or other companies called new products that are actively innovating in the field, but they're focusing more on the transfer process, and their products are absolutely outrageously expensive. Like their cheapest, like their standard products are like $6,000, right? But this is the market. This is a medical device market. At RHM Innovations, we're focusing on a different problem within the bathing process. So once you get into it, we're making it a more comfortable experience. We're going to control the water, and we're going to be significantly cheaper and more affordable than our competition that are actively innovating in the space, right? So basically walking them through why you're different and better in the ways that you want them to believe it. That's the important part. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions? Okay. And so then you get down to your business model. This, I'm sure a lot of us are more familiar with. You know, you got your business to business, your business to consumer, your indirect distribution models. Basically, how are you going to collect money? When you make a sale, who's going to be the buyer? And then where are the dollars changing hands and who gives you that money? And so, describe your company, how your company gets paid. Like we said, how does the cash eventually flow to you? Be sure to indicate the payment terms per sale, per month, right? So Jesse, for you, is this going to be freemium, premium?
Yeah, we're gonna apply a premium model, yeah.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So basically schools are the ones that are going to be paying for the access to our platform. companies can be on the platform for free, but if they want to maybe host an event, then they can purchase the access to students for an event. And then we also are going to have, on top of that, we're going to have data analytics tools that both the universities and the recruiters can make.
Love that. That's awesome. Yeah. Right? I think we did a good job explaining. And so describe your supply chain. So like, you know, for you being a tech platform, right? Like you have less to talk about, which is great. But for me, where our main component is aluminum, we have a lot to talk about. Not all of it's positive. So, you know, like when you have like, you know, international global conflict like the war in Ukraine, that significantly impacts the price and the time at which you get your products delivered. And so your marketing and sales plan. This is really, really, really critical because once you get to this point, you hopefully have your investors hooked. They're like, okay, how are you going to, again, capture this percentage of the market and, you know, actually deliver your products and services? And how are you going to also like raise awareness of your product? And so, and then, you know, any letters of intent, basically sales, you know, an agreement between you and a customer that's like when you have a finished product, they will purchase it. And so I'll walk you through what we say. So our marketing and sales plan is going right into facilities and getting live demonstrations and getting purchase orders for products. So we've already done 5 demonstrations at elder care and continuing care facilities. Pictured here are 2 of them at Glenmere and Cloverwood, which is the number 2 elder care facility in the state. We brought our product and the facilities organized the rest because they were so excited to see it. The executive director said, we're the top facility and it's innovations like these that keep us on top. And so we have potential channel partners that we can also in parallel utilize their platforms to advertise our services to our customers, which are the same customers. So we have, you know, National Seating and Mobility, which is actually a government agency that will go in and install and repair durable medical equipment. We have Aspire, which basically is an organization that creates events for people, disabled and elderly individuals. And so by partnering with these institutions, we can basically promote what they're doing on our web platform, and they can promote what we're doing. And so in this, the financial projections, this is where you say in your marketing plan, how is your marketing plan basically going to lead to your sales? And what I mean by this is, so here's our 5-year P&L. It should fit roughly this format. You have your revenue in your top line, your cost of goods sold here, your gross income, your margins, and then your SG&A, all of your sort of auxiliary expenses, and then what your operating income and your margins is, your bottom line. Okay. And so this should tell the story of in year 1, going directly and giving live demonstrations at facilities will help us reach our year 1 goal of 500 units sold. We will then utilize the existing marketing platforms at these facilities we sell to advertise the acquisition of our product to create more demand for sales demonstrations in year 2. We aim to acquire a distribution channel and partner with national staffing agencies as well as our channel partners as we expand in years 3 through 5. As you can see, we're projecting that we have a lot more sales and a lot more income. And so this is how you leverage your plan for marketing to justify your projections. That's really, really important because you're ultimately trying to tell that story, right? Your marketing needs to translate to your dollars and vice versa. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so then you're like, okay, I've told you what I've done. Let me brag a little bit to you. Why should you trust us and invest in us? And why are we the right team for you? Well, my co-founder and I, we're still students, and yet we've raised $55,000 in non-dilutive funds just from pitch competitions. And we didn't take advantage of that money. We put it right into our business and increased and built our business. We filed 2 provisional patents protecting our design. We filed a utility patent pending for our permanent design for our product. We filed 2 trademarks to protect, you know, sort of our taglines and names of our products. And we've developed 3 prototypes. Like, that's expensive. That's really expensive. And we've done all of this. And then in addition to this, we've been a part of many different accelerators and business development programs. With the kindness of the AIM Center, funded us to go to the RIT Summer Accelerator, which we learned pretty much most of this. So I would say if you're interested in learning about business and developing a product and stuff like that, The RT Summer Accelerator is amazing. And then in doing so, there was also an NSF I-Core short course. And so this is really where we learned how to do customer discovery. Like there's a right way to do it to get objective, unopinionated data from people that are relevant and could be customers for your product. And learning sort of the benefits and the right way to do it. Like you always have to be doing customer discovery as your market's evolving. And then currently we're in 2 commercial accelerators. We're actually in the University of Buffalo Cultivator Program, which has an investment of $100,000 for 5%. And then Launch New York, which is upstate New York's largest seed stage organization. And are really interested in building up the economy in upstate New York. And so our management team. So again, we've already talked about a lot of stuff. Now, I can tell you, I'm a PhD student. People would just say, well, Brandon, what do you know about business? And it's like, well, I've done a lot of stuff, but to supplement this knowledge, we've assembled an advisory board of aging business and design specialists to basically help us bring our products to market. And also to ask questions to when we don't know. So Dr. Victor Burkett, who's our human factors specialist, that's basically engineering for accessibility designs. Dr. Dan Phillips, similar field at RIT. Dr. Dan Buckmaster is the head of an engineering firm that is helping us develop our products because we don't have the facilities or the ability to do that ourselves. We have some aging specialists. We have an FDA regulatory specialist because if we want to get insurance reimbursement, what we've learned also from our customer discovery is that getting FDA approval is important. And then your learning objectives are your next steps depending on where you are in your business development, right? So Jesse, your early stages, depending on the accelerator or the program that you're in, it might be beneficial to say learning objectives, or if you've done some more stuff, what are your next steps in your development? And so for us, our next steps, this is year 1. This is year 1 for RHM Innovations. So our next steps are continuing product demonstrations, taking pre-orders, prepping to fundraise. Then we're going to be fundraising, ideally a pre-seed round over the summer of $250,000. Doing our first manufacturing run and fulfilling our first orders. And then continuing to fundraise so we can go full time and build the business and then sell, operating as an actual business. And so then your ask is like, what the heck are you there for? What is the purpose? What do you need from the investors, right? So not only would you be asking for money, so how much cash do you need to get started, justifying how much cash you need before you're self-sustaining. That's an entire lesson in and of itself that I personally am not super qualified to teach, but basically it goes back to your P&L. At what point do you become profitable and self-sustaining? And then you have to use sort of your revenue, your cost of goods, and there's an equation in there for that. And so, and then also you will get more respect if you go to investors that have resources and connections that will also help you strategically with your business. So for example, with us, it really wouldn't do us any good if we go to an investment firm that exclusively invests in tech. Why would I do that, right? Unless we're completely self-sustaining and they just have the most money, it would be more advantageous for an early stage company like mine in the medical device field to go to an investment firm that has a portfolio of companies that could act as strategic partners, customers, that sort of thing. And so here's an example. Also, if you're competing in pitch competitions, which I would recommend, we have the Mark Ain competition coming up, which is a really, really good and rigorous experience. We're actually previous winners of that competition, and it has helped a ton, let me tell you. When we did have enough interest, we had the Swarm Starter, which is the fall competition for $20,000. We also won that. So 30,000 of our 55,000 generously came from the Ain Center and the University of Rochester. And in that came a lot of mentorship, like the coaches there, many of them and the judges, many of them have their own investment firms. And they were like, maybe like you can check in with us. So we have developed a relationship, not only from getting money, but with people who could be very helpful in developing our business and could be investors down the line. So if you're competing in a competition, basically say, award you the grand prize and give like an actual, ask for it. Like this money will help us get this, make sure it's reasonable. Connect you with like early adopters, strategic partners, whatever you need for your business development. And then this is an example of what we're going to be asking for when we start raising some money. And so, a thank you slide, something positive, I suppose, or whatever the messages you're trying to get. And that's about it. There's a couple of events that are coming up that I'll advertise, but any questions, comments, concerns on everything that we covered today?
Well, presentation. Like when you're on stage and there's pressure and there's investors looking at you and you forget a slide or you're in that moment. Do you have any tips on that?
I do. That happened to me for sure. I get very nervous. I've done enough of these where I've learned how to, mitigate some of those. I would say that, so when you're making a pitch, right? A lot of times your pitch is going to be short, 3, 5, 7, 10 minutes. The longest pitch that I've heard of is 15 minutes. Still relatively short. I personally make a script. Like my preparation for it, like I will literally make a script and I will time it out. When I read it very slowly, I will be very diligent in my transitions and stuff like that to know that like if I do mess up, I have time to recover. So typically I'll make for a 5-minute pitch, I'll make like a 4-minute and 20-second presentation that normally will take a little bit longer. And then I'll memorize it. The more you do that, then you don't have to memorize that, but it gets you into the mindset of like, what are my buzzwords for the company? Like for example, durable medical equipment company, we develop products to assist in the bathing process. Practicing in a more formal way like that, making a script is very helpful just to get your language down because you're developing an entity, you're developing a business. It's almost like, you're making a presentation for an academic, track in the way that like, there are certain ways to say things. There are best practices and best things to say. In the finals of the Buffalo competition that we competed in last year, I did totally blank. It was super embarrassing. There was like 300 people in the crowd. But I took a breath, looked at the slide, and I did the best I could, got through it, and then I recovered. And to me, I thought that it was an awful thing. To everyone else, they were like, wow, I get it. You did a good job, kind of thing. So I would say practice, practice, practice. Make your scripts, especially at the beginning when you're developing your pitches, because it'll come naturally easier to you later. And always build in a time for a breath. Obviously making your pitch too short is not really great, but if you're finishing maybe 20, 30 seconds sooner, no one's going to be unhappy with you. That actually might be a good thing. Yeah. Well, good question.
Thank you.
Well,
Very insightful.
yeah. How about you, Nick?
Maybe just more about pitching in general, but obviously sometimes your first pitch doesn't go well, right? So you're gonna have to do a second, maybe even a third. Some people don't get it for hundreds of times. They pitch to different kinds of investors. Obviously they're changing their pitch because they're approaching different kinds of people. They have to kind of know the audience. But how do you, obviously something like this it seems like it'd be a little easier because you have that personal experience. So that's going to stick with you through most of the pitches, I would assume. But for something that's less emotional, how would you kind of still stay energized or passionate about it, after doing it, hundreds of times?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that what's been very beneficial for us is that we are very passionate about the problem. We haven't lost interest in it. So I would say it's the easiest thing to join a company, build a company with a topic that you're very passionate about. So if you lose that passion, it happens, right? I think that's the difference between a lot of entrepreneurs, successful versus unsuccessful. I think you have to have that passion. I think that you're going to go through a lot of crap. You're going to go through a lot of late nights. You're going to push yourself. I'm building a business and balancing a PhD. If it wasn't worth it, I would have stopped a long time ago. You know what I mean? But to circle back around to, your point, there's plenty of people if you're building a tech platform that is supposed to just be better than a different one, it doesn't necessarily have to be heavy on the pathos, the emotion, as long as you like money makes the world go round. If you're saving somebody money or you're providing an alternative way to increase the sort of ease of use of a process, there's many things that people will just be like, ah, oh, that's amazing. And that's where your customer discovery comes in. If you know that so many people feel strongly enough about the problem that you're solving, then that's good news. I would say if you're going to build a company, it's about the problem, not the solution, because your products are going to change. I showed you a lot of slides of the aiding arm. It changes all the time. It's changed since we first started it, and that's because our solution is developing a superior assistive bathing device once you get in the shower. What that's going to look like after you talk and you test with people, you have to be humble. You have to be willing to pivot. You have to be willing to accept constructive criticism. You also have to be good at sifting out what's bullshit and what's not. Sorry for my, for my language, but you have to be, good at sifting out what's good and what's not good. I would say, really it's, if you don't have the passion, then it's not worth doing at the end of the day. But pitching is hard, and I guess, being able to get back up, take constructive criticism. I would just say practice. Like the pitch competitions have been awesome because it's basically free advice from investors, because the investors are typically like judges are typically investors or people that like have a lot of business experience. And we've pitched so many times that it's second nature to us now. So get your friends together. Doesn't necessarily have to be investors or judges or those types of things. I would just say practice will definitely make it perfect. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, or just like, obviously like you have that passion, right? And if someone, the investor or whoever you're pitching to, like, they might not have that passion because they don't understand. Like a lot of investors inside, they just care about the money.
Yeah.
They just, will you make me money? Yes. Will you make my life easier? Yes. Okay, I buy in. So for something like that, where like you have to play your cards where you can't push on that path as maybe it's the lowest, or ethos that you're pushing for on. Like you say, oh well, this product will make your life easier, will save you money. That's why we're better. Like, can you still keep that passion without like your pathos passion without one using the ethos of the logos more, especially because you have the passion, they don't. You can't just give them the passion or give that the emotional kind of appeal. So you have to really just kind of pull on what they care about, the money, which can be difficult, but
right. Yeah, that's a good point. I would say that maybe a better way to picture sort of the pathos is like life is stressful, right? And life is hard, and that's never going to change. The purpose of a lot of ventures and entrepreneurship stuff is to develop solutions to reduce the stress of processes. So your pathos can literally just be like, what makes you feel stressful? Like that pit, that burning in your stomach, that's like, what makes you want to just throw your hands up and say, I give up, whether it's, debugging a program on Python, or, you're trying to format something on Word and, doing something like that. I think that it's hard to take you still need that emotional piece, but I think in building your pitch and your problem and presenting like it around why this problem should stress you out, and then framing it, if they haven't gone through it themselves, like you could literally just say, imagine you are a computer scientist, right? And imagine you're a student, from a different country who's trying to come over to the United States or trying to get these opportunities. There are millions of people that are just like this. What if you were one of them? And they don't necessarily have to. I think that's what's really good about empathy. Like there are investors that don't have empathy or like don't really super care about that. So you will get, even if you do a really great job pitching your problem, you might not get a really good reception. But if someone has, empathy towards a particular problem or just in general, and you do a good job of, explaining why something is stressful from a time sink, like a resources perspective. If you can say, like, you could save time, energy, money, stress, physical stress. I think that every problem has something like that. So I think that, and if a problem doesn't, it might not be worth going for it. You know what I mean? So yeah, you have to be creative. You have to be very creative. I'm not a very creative person when it comes to drawing stuff or whatever, but like I could like Quincy Allen, who was a judge, and he was a previous CEO of Xerox. He was a judge for the Swarm Starter. He told me I could sell a rock. Like, what a compliment, So you kind of have to have that skill, or find someone who has that skill in developing a pitch or an argument or something like that. If the problem is big enough and significant enough, and the market's big enough, then you could do it, I would say. But it's a good point. Like, that's like, that's a question you need to ask yourself. If it's worth going for, can I convince people to buy it? Can I convince people it matters? Yeah. Okay. I will leave you guys with a couple of events that are coming up. So my group, SMD Entrepreneurs, School of Medicine and Dentistry, we have an event the last Wednesday of every month. We provide pizza and beverages. And we usually have an invited speaker. This time, Dr. Michael Wilson, who is CEO of Viomers, which is a local surgical tool education platform. He's coming in and giving us a talk about how he used his degree to become an entrepreneur. Maybe not relevant to you guys, but we have this. And then this one might be relevant to you guys, especially you, and definitely both of you guys for sure. We are doing the second of a series of networking events between University of Rochester students and Rochester business leaders. So we're talking, investors, CEOs, and people who have had a lot of experience. We're going to be meeting downtown at FTS, which is a staffing company on Clinton Avenue, April 13th. So please scan this and then register for this. There will be food, drinks will be provided. And if you have any questions, email either myself, Kathy, or Samia, who's the head of the Google Developers Group. And tell your friends who are entrepreneurial minded. We really just want entrepreneurs and people who are interested in, getting into different businesses, especially sticking around in the area. But yeah, please scan that. If you haven't scanned it, go ahead and scan it. Yeah, that's your requirement for leaving. And there will be a bus that will transport students on a continuous loop from the Innerfaith Chapel to there. So yeah.
Should I say SMD Entrepreneurs Club? Is how I heard about it?
Sure. Or Incent or something, whatever it is. But yeah, that's all. Thank you guys. And thank you for the questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.